really glad that you could take a few minutes out of your busy day to be with us. Appreciate your time. I do want to spend just a few minutes here talking about just the selection for spray nozzles. Let me start off this part of it with just a question to you guys. What do you really want from your nozzles, as far as, you know, what do you want them to do for you? Why do we use the nozzles we use?
Coverage.
Coverage, okay, that's a good one. Anything else? Reduce drift. So we kind of have two issues that are probably pretty critical. We want the coverage with the least amount of water, right? And we don't want to have that that product drifting all over, particularly if it's something that's volatile that we need to really keep watch out for. This study here had a couple different nozzles that were selected for, and we'll look at those nozzles here in just a minute. We had either 10 or 20 gallons per acre applied, depending on the label that you see down on the bottom. If you come back and you walk through, you'll see that the different nozzles are listed there, as well as the gallonage and that kind of stuff. Now, we would expect, Daryl would say, that if we had coarse droplets and something with lower amounts of water applied, we probably would expect poor results, right? This year that didn't prove true, so we had just, you know, if you were knowing the future, you could have went out with that 10-gallon coverage and done just fine with any kind of apparently any nozzle that we've got here in the demonstration plot. But typically that doesn't happen, and typically we like to really stress the idea that, you know, we need to select for the nozzle that's going to do the best job for us. And what we've got here on this boom is I've got a pair of each nozzles. Our first one is 8001 XL tip, probably one of the most common tips used in the northern plains for spraying agricultural chemicals. This one's going to produce a finer droplet, so we're probably going to select that in cases where we need to have some good coverage. That might be something like a fungicide or something of that nature, might be a tip like that, or we could have it in certain herbicide programs that we might use. The next one down is 8003, so we have a little more gallonage coming out of the end of that tip, and this one's producing a medium type of a spray pattern, or spray droplet. And basically this is the one, I guess, if as we demonstrated, is the one that we probably would say if we're going to go for a Roundup treatment, this is probably the one we're aiming for. We don't need all that fine mist that would come out of there. We do need some coverage, but we don't need coarse coverage. But like Daryl said, we've got some challenges with some of the new technologies that'll be coming down the road to switch over to those coarser sprays. So, but right now, as far as, you know, for doing that treatment, this is probably one of the kind of tip that we'd be looking for. Now, the next four we're going to cover here, these are air induction tips. Anybody use air induction tips? Designed for spray or drift reduction. The idea behind it is that it has a small hole which allows air to mix in with the spray mixture, and will allow or create larger droplets to form before it exits out the end of that nozzle. Okay, this one happens to be a 110-degree angle with a 3-gallon tip. And the last one, and these will produce a coarse droplet. These last two, 110 with a 3-gallon, get an air induction, but this one is designed so that we'll have some extra very coarse type droplets come out of the end of that that nozzle. Actually, it's going to be these last two. But regardless of what, we're going to run this at 15 pounds per square inch. And most of these treatments were done, the first 3 treatments were done at 3.5 miles an hour. The remaining treatments were all done at 2.5. So I'm not sure what the difference or why they went a little faster on those, but the deal is about 15 pounds of pressure was applied. Now, turn it on, you can observe. You can observe the tips that we were just talking about. We talked about this one as far as it's producing a coarse droplet, and as you can see, this one's going to be pretty adequate as far as maybe combating some of those issues of drift movement. So if I get your camera wet, I'm sorry. So, but anyway, you can see that one's coming off very, very coarse type setting. So if we're looking at probably like a soil applied herbicide or something like that, these are some of the tips that we might consider using on there. Move down here and you can see it's just maybe just a little bit finer fine or particles coming off of those two tips here. Again, these are the ear induction tips that we're looking at. Both of them produce some pretty coarse droplets. These might be ones that if we get into those Banville and those kind of systems that are calling for, these might be tips that, or at least the kind of spray droplets that we're going to try to need to create in order to use that product. I'm just going to skip down to the end here. If you were out spraying on a 10-mile-an-hour wind, would this one be, especially if you're putting out something like Roundup or some other kind of a volatile product that might tend to drift, would this one be acceptable? Would you be willing to go out there and do that? You might be willing, but you probably maybe shouldn't be out there with that one, because you can really pick up those fines as you walk through that. And you can kind of just see that really even just in the little bit of, got just a light wind, and we can see quite a bit kind of moving away. Ideally, this is what we're trying to create, and don't mind this guy, there's something wrong with him, so don't pay any attention to him. But we've got these kind of these larger kind of in between droplets versus this one or those two. One thing we didn't talk about is how we kind of rate these things. What do you know? What kind of ratings that we would be shooting for, or the kind of size we'd be shooting for, as far as avoiding drift and still getting good coverage? Well, ideally we want about 300 microns. What's the what would be the standard for a micron? 100 microns is about the thickness of the hair on your head. So we want probably something that's about 3 times the thickness of the hair on your head. Okay, so 300 is ideal when we're getting into these spray situations, if we're going to put up Roundup and those kind of things. So this is kind of the look we're looking for. Just need to do some nozzle research as far as what's available out there. There is a publication that we do have that I did give you the web publication address on that handout that I would encourage you to look at, because this does a pretty nice job of showing as well as describing the nozzle tips that you'd be using. It's got that water paper, water sensitive paper that they run through and did tests on them. And it kind of gives you an idea what the coverage would be for each of the respective nozzles that you might be selecting out for. It's a pretty good publication. Goes through a pretty good, extensive read as far as what's out there for nozzles and things to consider. There's another one that's on your paper that's a calibration publication. Again, those would be available through the web. If you don't have that ability to access that, you can certainly give Daryl or myself a call. Our information is on that sheet as well, as far as email or phone call. If you need a paper copy, we'll certainly try to match you up with something like that. In addition, I know Daryl's got some other publications that he would like to talk to.
I think I'll pick it up here. Just kind of quickly to move on here, but you may have noticed up in the shed the pesticide guide that we've put out. This is a crop protection guide, and this is a little change from what we've had in the past. A lot of you are probably used to the weed fact sheet that we had put out, and this is actually a combination efforts of weeds, in entomology, and pathology. So this has got insects, mites, weeds, and all the diseases for the individual crops. This happens to be the one for soybeans. Corn is up there and wheat is up there. I'll mention this because for the volunteer corn, those products that I mentioned earlier, there is a section in here for volunteer corn control, and the one that talks about using the glyphosate system and the things that have been gleaned from the label to make sure that you have some success of putting those programs together, or at least looking at what you want to use with that. Another important thing that you'll find here on the weed section is a weed rating chart for grasses and broadleaf weeds, pre-emerge and post-emerge treatments with a numerical rating from the research that we've done here at SDSU. So it's a real handy guide. It's going to be updated annually, but if you haven't picked one up, there's plenty of copies up at the shed, and I would sure encourage you to do so.